rental of controversial Sussex Street drug bond to end in December. Former PNC parliamentarian and convicted terrorist dies in U.S. prison. And the relatives of Berbice piracy victims get $100,000 compensation from government. These and more right now in our Friday, June 29 edition of MTV's News Update. I'm Ashley Scotland. Good evening to our viewers in Guyana and online. Guyana has maintained its Tier 2 status in the recently released U.S. State Department 2017 report on trafficking in persons. Kippenny Jordan reports.
U.S. State Department report stated that Guyana fully met the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking in persons. But while Guyana maintained its status, it failed to increase protection and services for victims outside the capital or provide adequate protection and shelter for child and male victims. As such, it recommended that the government takes several actions. Among them are establishment of a fund for specialized victim services, vigorously investigating and prosecuting labor trafficking cases, and hold convicted traffickers, including complicit public officials, accountable by imposing sufficiently stringent sentences. It also recommended that there will be training for law enforcement, judiciary officials, and frontline responders, especially those working outside the capital, on victim identification and referral procedure. Finalizing the written identification procedures to better guide law enforcement officials, provide additional protection for victims to enable them to testify against traffickers in a way that minimizes re-traumatization, record the number of cases reported to the trafficking hotline to promote a rapid investigative and victim assistance response, and provide training for diplomatic personnel on human trafficking were some of the other recommendations.
The recommendations included in the report did not go unnoticed. In some of the mentioned areas, such as those pertaining to training, identification procedures, and victim services outside the capital, improvement has already started. In others, such as with regard to an increase in the rate of conviction, there is much more to be done.
Guyana managed to maintain its status after the approval of the 2017-2018 National Action Plan for combating trafficking in persons, increasing the number of investigations, prosecutions and convictions, and identifying and assisting more victims for the second year in a row. Kippenny Jordan reporting for MTV's News Update.
This is MTV News Update, and more news after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are with a news update. The Pan American Health Organization has recommended a 2-month trial period for the smelting of gold at a new site located in Georgetown. This follows investigation into high mercury presence at the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission head office in Georgetown. Details from Sandy Romotor.
During an exclusive interview with this newscast, the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization representative, Dr. William Aducro, said the investigation has been completed. The Pan American Health Organization has been called in to assist the government to further investigate the emission of mercury at 2 sites. During investigations at the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission and the Gold Board, several items were found containing mercury. Subsequently, the items were recommended for disposal, which will be facilitated by an international atomic agency.
Now they've put their initial comments together to do a debriefing. We are expecting that once they are back, they are going to give us a 10-pager. And that 10-pager, we are hoping to get that within 2 weeks to a month. The full report, which is going to be a much longer document, we are probably expecting in about 2 months.
He said the team advocated for a room with negative pressure for the smelting of gold, which will allow for air to flow into an isolated room but not escape. The 5-member team also recommends sequential testing and ongoing monitoring of the staff at the new site.
And apparently, from the cursory look by the team, they said the building was adequate, but had asked the government to do a 2-week trial period whereby they will burn gold and in there, and then continue monitoring to see whether everything is in good order.
More than 1 month now, close to 100 employees of the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission and the Guyana Gold Board have been affected by the mercury emission. The cause of the emission was as a result of a technical mishap with the chimney at the smelting room at the Guyana Gold Board. Since that incident, the smelting of gold was halted and a private contractor was employed by the board to conduct the smelting. Sandy Ramutar for MTV's News Update.
Minister of Public Health Vorda Lawrence's response submitted to the National Assembly earlier this week revealed that between July 2016 and March 2018, the government paid $264.5 million to Linden Holdings Incorporated for the rental of the building at Sussex Street, All Boys Town, Georgetown. The bond is currently being rented by the ministry to house a CT scan machine. This expensive piece of equipment requires stringent specifications for storage, and according to the minister, the bond fits these requirements. The Department of Public Information in a statement quoted Minister Lawrence as saying that, as of December 31, 2018, the Ministry of Public Health will not be renting any more bonds, including this one that has been at the center of much controversy. The ministry has budgeted for the construction of a drug bond in Kingston, Georgetown, while expansion work on the diamond bond is underway. Additionally, the ministry adoption of a new procurement system for drugs and medical supplies will require them to have adequate, specified and suitable spaces for the storage of these supplies. The rental of the bond on Sussex Street from Linden Holdings Inc., whose principal is People's National Congress Reform member Lawrence Singh, dates back to 2016 when the opposition People's Progressive Party Civic, PPPC, had raised concerns about the rental of the facility. Reporting for MTV's News Update, I am GUYANESE Abrams.
Former People's National Congress parliamentarian Abdul Qadir, who was convicted 8 years ago for terrorism, has died in a United States prison, Demerara Waves has reported. The website said relatives have confirmed that Qadir, 66, who also served as mayor of the town of Linden, died this morning at a prison medical facility after complaining of feeling unwell. Qadir, born Michael Seaforth, was arrested in 2007 in Trinidad, where he had been expected to transit to Venezuela before flying to Iran. He was extradited to the U.S., where he and several others were charged and prosecuted for terrorism based on allegations that they had planned to blow up fuel tanks at the John F. Kennedy International Airport. The others were Guyanese-American Russell De Freitas, Karim Ibrahim of Trinidad, and Abdul Noor of Guyana. With incidences of substandard drugs in the local market, it has now become compulsory for importers to have medical supplies registered with the Caribbean registration system. Details from Sandy Ramutar.
Director of the Government Analyst Food and Drug Department, Marlon Cole, says drugs distributed on the market will now be subject to scrutiny with the implementation of the new system. This will see local distributors of pharmaceuticals have their drugs registered to the Caribbean registration system. Cole says the CRS will then greenlight drugs that are to be registered and sold on the local market.
Document being submitted to CARFA, the drug being properly assessed, and then the recommendation made, and then we decide whether we would register or not and issue the marketing authorization for the product to be sold on our local market.
The system will be facilitated through a drug advisory committee and will be compulsory for all distributors. Pharmaceuticals will then be registered through a VB software in a report format and sent to Uppsala.
In some cases, local distributors are unable to process the dossier through CARFA because of the nature of the product, and then they're allowed to come to us directly and we facilitate the process in those cases. Following that process, PAHO WHO will recommend whether action should be taken against the discovery of any substandard drugs. Sandy Ramutar for MTV's News Update.
Still to come after the break, relatives of Berbice piracy victims get $100,000 compensation from government. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching MTV's News Update. The underperformance of boys at the National Grade 6 Assessment is becoming a worrying trend for the Education Ministry. Based on statistics of the 174 students who performed exceedingly well at this year's NGSA, a mere 70 were boys. Kipini Jordan reports.
Let me give you a little gender perspective. The top 1% of this year's cohort is comprised of 104 females compared to 70 males. And that will give you a rough idea of the gender dynamics. This morning I was at the University of Guyanese's event. I was there speaking about what? Male underperformance. The data there was telling a story, not a good story for Guyana.
Chief Education Officer Marcel Hudson explained that as the results show, the girls have outperformed the boys. Meanwhile, he spoke on the gap between hinterland and coastal schools. He said the ministry will continue to roll out projects for the improvement of teachers in these areas, which will in turn improve learning and better performance from pupils. Kipini Jordan reporting for MTV's News Update.
Families of the 6 fishermen who were killed in the deadly piracy attack in Suriname's waters have received a mere 100,000 Guyana dollars compensation from the government.
The $100,000 each was handed over today to the relatives of the fishermen by Minister of Public Security Camarade Ramdatan came as a result of a cabinet decision. The relatives of Glenroy Jones, Sunil Ramatar, Sharon Lovell, Vicky Prasad, and Dionarang Gopadan received their compensation today. The remaining 11 families of the victims will receive their compensation when they can establish that they are indeed relatives of the men who died. The minister noted the families are expected to receive counseling through the Ministries of Public Health and Social Protection. Further, he elaborated that Cabinet had approved a final sum of money since during his visit on May 5, he had committed to give some means of financial support.
Indeed, it is a moment when we are all saddened, yes, indeed, because of the deaths that occurred and the traumatic effects it would have had on the many relatives. And indeed, a number of relatives did contact the ministry and also the Commissioner of Police, consequent upon the 2 attacks in Suriname's waters in which so many people died, and indicated that they would need some financial help to at least do a couple of things, that is travel to Suriname and whatever else that it would have taken to ensure that the days of their mourning and so on are financed, as it were. And of course we had to ensure that then we go to the proper authorities, namely the Cabinet, to get funding in relation to this, and recently that was done.
In late April, pirates attacked 4 boats carrying about 20 Guyanese fishermen in Suriname's waters and robbed them. The men were severely chopped about their bodies and dumped overboard. 4 of the injured men made it to land alive, while the others either turned up dead or are still missing. Reporting for MTV's News Update, I am Yanis Abrams.
The National Blood Transfusion Services has recorded a huge increase in blood donation for the first half of the year. Details from Sandy Ramatar.
Director of the National Blood Transfusion Services, Dr. Pedro Lewis, says more donors are frequenting the blood bank. This has resulted in a remarkable increase in blood supplies for the first half of the year. The blood bank is expected to reach a target of 13,000 units annually.
Yeah, the first half of the year right now, our count of course is like, we got like over 200 more than we had for last year. So the supply is great.
According to him, the unit is always in need of blood supplies, especially from the O-negative group. Dr. Pedro says the blood bank will also be expanding its reach to the hinterland to ensure adequate supplies are available there. The National Blood Transfusion Services is urging persons to come out and donate and help save lives. Sandy Ramutar, Frame TV's News Update.